Our first conversation, the next frontier, scaling your startup in the new economy. Please welcome panelists Nicole Gibbons, founder and CEO, Claire; Deepica Mutayla, founder and CEO, Live Tinted; Maria Palacio, co-founder and CEO, Progeny Coffee; and moderator Alexandra Sternlicht, Under 30 editorial community lead and reporter, Forbes.
Everyone. So glad to be here with these three amazing female founders. It's no easy job to follow Sierra and Sheryl Sandberg, but I think you're in for a real treat today. And I will be taking audience questions, so please put those into the chat and hopefully we can get to all of them. So the women I'm joined by today are amazing. Nicole has raised multiple millions of dollars. And Maria, her coffee is in places like Target, and Deepica has almost 400,000 followers on Instagram. Tell me a little bit about how you guys got to the scale that you're at today. What's been the most important part of it?
Alexandra, thank you so much for this. And it has been such a pleasure, to share this stage with such an incredible entrepreneurs like Deepica and Nicole, who have incredible trajectories. To your question, I think it has been being very focused, mission-driven, and resilience has been one of the key things. One thing that I've noticed that the moment you have vision and mission, and you carry that, and you believe in what you're doing, it allows you to break through those barriers and really knock those doors that you never even thought you could knock down. And so, and one thing that, COVID had taught us is that resilience to keep on pushing. So I feel like that's been one of the things. And another thing that I learned that was very important is that how do you create the right culture and the right team that's going to lead this mission? Because definitely this is not a one person's job, or, it's not just me knocking the door, but I'm sure behind Nicole and behind Deepica, there's such an incredible team that are believing in the mission and they're standing their mission that allows them to wake up every morning and just push their mission forward.
I couldn't agree more. I think you have to be super mission driven. My personal career trajectory has been a long, winding road to get to where I am today as the founder and CEO of Claire, but I've always had the same mission, right? When I was working as an interior designer, it was helping people create beautiful homes, and we're continuing that mission through the work with Claire. And I think that resilience and that grit, especially over the past couple of years of this pandemic, never more has that attribute been a top skill to have as a founder in order to thrive.
Yeah, I retweet both of them. It's all about focusing on your why and why you got started, because we all learned the last year, it's not easy. It's going to have its ups and downs, but if you remind yourself why you got started, why you're doing this in the first place, outside of the revenue aspect and the purpose focus of it all, it keeps you going.
Mm-hmm. And that touches on something that I think has been important for everyone, and all the founders in the audience can relate to, is this idea of reinvention. Maria, I know that when you got started, you were originally, serving your coffee in offices like Facebook and Google. Now obviously when the pandemic happened, you weren't able to do that anymore. Can you talk a little bit about that pivot and how you managed to navigate that?
Yes. Oh my gosh, that was a wild time. So a little bit of background for those founders out there that are listening to us. So when we first started, they advised us, do one thing and do it well, go just for one sales channel. So we wanted B2B, e-commerce, and they're no, do one thing. So we went after B2B. So Progeny Coffee is a mission-driven company to lift farmers out of poverty through our sustainable coffee chain and circular economy. In order to do that, we need to scale. So we don't do cherries. It's all embedded. And so we needed to move large volumes. And so we decided to go after B2Bs, and being in Silicon Valley, we're serving Google, Facebook, Intuit, and so many more, where they got to adopt our farmers. And we, by 2019, we were growing. We were holding large contract values. It looked really good. It's those moments that you feel I got it, and we're getting there, we figure it out. And so then, right, the pandemic hit and we lost 97% of our revenue because all of our clients closed in a day. And that was our only revenue. We didn't have really like an e-commerce, or we didn't have a marketing team or anything like that. And so it was this journey where our team, and it ties back to what we were saying about vision and mission, our team was so committed to the mission and the farmers that everybody needed to shift their role. So like suddenly like our biz dev manager needed to do runs and production. Our everybody shifted from like to be now then social media managers, marketing, and we didn't even have a marketing team, all the way to launching a subscription, and then start also knocking doors into retailers. I do need to say there was a moment that like I always we cried, like I cried if we're very honest, but there was a moment of like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and let's push forward because we cannot let our farmers just unattended. And so it was a beautiful moment that taught us resilience, that a well mission driven team really goes through. And so highlight to all my team that is listening. So yeah, it was quite a journey, I will need to say, but thankful that now we are on the other side.
That's pretty amazing. I'm wondering, Nicole and Deepica, hopefully the pandemic is really a once in a lifetime type thing, but I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your reinventions and what you had to go through in that difficult time that all founders face during their career trajectories.
Yeah, I think for us, our business, we were lucky beneficiaries of the COVID boom with a lot of people being stuck at home. Lots of people wanted to paint their spaces. So we actually grew about 550%.
Wow.
Which was,
that's
wonderful.
Amazing.
But as a really small team, it was incredibly taxing on our own bandwidth, and being able to keep up with the demand and pivot some of our processes to be able to handle that larger volume of customers. And and as we went into the pandemic, we have a lot of consultants and freelancers that support us, but we were a 4-person team. So
wow,
it required a lot of our bandwidth to thrive in 2020 for sure. And I think as a young company, don't underestimate the importance of establishing processes that can scale, because as you grow, that's going to become more important. So we've been very process focused at Claire. And then even though 2020 was really smooth, this year has been really challenging for us. A lot of supply chain challenges and operational challenges, 3.5 years in business, natural team attrition, and kind of dealing through all of that change and has required also, a lot of pivoting. And so I think kind of going back to that first point of being really resilient and having a lot of grit, it's full of ups and downs. So definitely make sure that when you're in this journey, for anyone out there who's starting a business and is really young in your trajectory, it's really important that you kind of maintain that sort of positivity throughout the journey, because you'll need that in order to make it through those low points for sure.
Wow. Yeah. We did not have 500% growth. That's amazing. By the way.
Yeah, seriously.
I was really just trying to focus on surviving, not thriving. Honestly, it was really hard, right? When you're an ambitious person, and the leader of the company, you feel a heavy weight and responsibility. There's not just customers, but there's employees and people who are counting on you. And I think on the positive side, though, what it forced us to do as a company was, it gave me back time to step back and look at the business and say, these are the things that we need to focus on rather than just going and launching new products. Let's think about how we can be as efficient as possible and profitable as possible. And I wasn't taking the time to do that. It was too much to, you're just going when you're building a company. And I think the other really great win was, it made me realize that the talent pool can be much bigger than we had expected for hiring. Instead of thinking everyone had to be in LA where our office was, we actually got rid of our office because we were trying to cut costs. And I hired a senior employee that lives in New York. And so I think I was really trying to focus on the positivity of all of this and recognize that first of all, the whole world is going through this. And I know that, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but this kind of herd mentality of like, we're all going through it together and let's just survive during this time. And I am proud to say we did grow, and to me that is the focus on, I'm in this for the long game. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. I know that's a line people say all the time, but it's very real. Like I want Live Tinted to be a legacy brand that outlives myself. So I'm not in this for some quick win. And that means there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but that's part of the journey.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really interesting point, Deepica, about hiring. For a lot of young companies, you need people doing everything, and that's just not the reality. How do you know where to prioritize your hiring? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I will say it is really nice at this stage now to step back and actually be able to hire specialists rather than generalists. But yes, in the beginning, it was all about hiring people who were agile and comfortable wearing so many hats at once. And so down from like junior people who are right out of college, but also to like the senior level. If you are on our marketing team, there is no know your e-com versus integrated marketing communications versus PR or any of those things. You're on the marketing team, but you're probably also business development strategy, and you're kind of supply chain because you're probably going to be boxing some things up. And I think that is the most important thing to consider when you're a young business just starting out, is focus on the person and ask questions about like their general overarching passion for the company. I feel so fired up by the employees we have right now because I can feel their passion for what we're doing day in and day out. And I think that goes back to what I think all of us are saying, is being a purpose-driven brand that has a mission beyond just a physical product, because people come in every single day knowing that they're doing something that's bigger than themselves. And I think that helps you get through pandemics. Just the ups and downs of everything building a company is, at least for me, and listen, I'm still young in this whole thing. Maybe it'll get to a point where I really just need the data-driven person, but no matter what, I always want people who you feel that they just like drip in passion for the business.
Yeah, I really like what you just said, Deepica. And it's really true, as we are a coffee company, and we have had big fails and big wins on our hiring, but definitely when you're a small company, how do you find those teammates that are okay to, in our case today, doing deliveries, boxing, business development, going up to a client, but knowing that they are mission driven, like knowing that even if they're boxing coffee, they're lifting a farmer out of poverty and they're just passionate about the mission. But it has been really beautiful then now to transition right now, where we were just hiring based on our current needs, and everyone just needed to wear like so many hats, to now being able to step back and be like, okay, this is our strategy. And it's something that I think that Deepica also mentioned, that COVID allowed us was to step back and be like, okay, we're going to need to reinvent our whole company right now, because like our sales strategy just went like through the garbage, and like, how do we reinvent ourselves? So it allowed us to kind of have that step back and be like, okay, who do we really need? And how do we create space for those people that are not very obvious, like those that came out from an Ivy League, those who are far away, like, we also need now start hiring someone that it's not in our city, but in other cities, right? Because we are a little bit remote right now. So I feel like this pandemic moment gave us space to kind of broaden and rethink our hiring. And so right now we have incredible people that we know they needed a chance. And once you give them the chance and they're fueled with mission and passion, they just go that extra mile.
Yeah, I second everything. I mean, hiring has been one of my personal biggest challenges as a founder. And I'd say one other kind of great bit of advice is, don't underestimate the importance of hiring for attitude. There's so many people that have the hard skills, who have the subject matter expertise, but in an early stage startup, when there's a lot of ambiguity, there maybe isn't a process or a roadmap for everything. You need the kind of people who can build and who can establish those processes and who can, operate and kind of build something from nothing. And, it took a while for me to hone in on who are the types of people that embody the values that demonstrate they can do that. But that's a really, really important thing. And the earlier you can bring that onto your team, I think the less hiring mistakes you'll make.
Definitely. And there's a great question from the audience that's just come in about the practicality of it all. How do you find the right people?
It's really challenging. I mean, right now I'm kind of going through a whole wave of reinventing my team and bringing on a whole new group of people. We're at a kind of a new inflection point of growth where the business's needs today are very different than what they are 3 years ago. So for some of the more senior roles, it's a mix of posting jobs on all the platforms like LinkedIn. And, we use an applicant tracking system that kind of automatically sort of pushes the jobs out to all the relevant platforms, but then also working with a recruiter to help increase my personal bandwidth. I think recruiters can be very expensive, but for senior level hires that are going to have a big impact on your company, I think it's well worth the expense. And I think it's really about casting a wide net, because right now, I don't know how the other founders in the room are feeling, but it is a really challenging time to be hiring. It's a lot of competition. There's a lot of movement. People are leaving their roles. It feels like people are commanding a lot higher salaries these days. And it's just a really competitive market for talent. So I'd say the more you can kind of brand your company and your employer brand, the wider net you can cast, to build as wide of a talent pool as possible will help you. And then you're going to have to talk to a lot of people. I mean, for some of the roles that I've hired for, I spoke to maybe 30 people before I honed in on candidates that I felt were, kind of worth moving on to closer towards that offer phase. So, a lot of times you'll hear people say one of your biggest roles as a founder is hiring, right? So that you can find the right people to help you carry that vision forward.
Yes. One thing that I noticed is that when you build your brand and you're building the brand for an audience and you're so focused about the audience, that it appeals to the audience and everything. But I think sometimes we forget how to build a brand that also appeals to hiring, because you need to bring in the right talent and you need to make sure that people are getting to know your brand, but as well as like who you are as a company, what are your values internally and the culture you're creating, and therefore the words start spreading out. So in our case, we have been lucky where people will reach out to us because there's already that voice, that this is what we stand for, not only outwardly, but also inwardly. Because, we believe that if the whole company internally is mission driven, then it's going to trickle out. But in a more practical way, I think we have, use LinkedIn, use Sprout and all of these, platforms to put out there. But if you don't put it along with how you're positioning your brand internally, I think it will be really hard for you to attract that right talent. And then also analyzing like what are the benefits. And sometimes when you're a small company, you just cannot sometimes when you're starting providing 401k or benefits or healthy or whatever it is, like stock options and all of those fancy things, but like being creative on what you're offering, like paid vacations or flexible timing or remote working that could appeal to other, and you're competing against these like massive companies that are able to pay the high salaries, the full packages. So just thinking like, what are you offering to them that it's so appealing that they'll prefer coming to your company?
I think it's a really great question, because it is, I think, as a founder, the most difficult part of the entire job, because you are constantly recruiting. One of my investors said that to me, that is the role, literally, like what Nicole said, it's like very real. So when I started, it was first off of my social media, and I recognize that I do have like a following, so that does help. But outside of that, LinkedIn, by the way, I hadn't used LinkedIn in years because I wasn't searching for a job. And then I realized, whoa, this is a great tool to be able to actually, I always feel silly posting the accolades of the company. There is this pride that comes from it, but at the same time, you're so busy going, you forget to like actually celebrate them. And now actually through trying to recruit talent, it's forced me to take a step back and actually celebrate those wins and share them, because that does help bring in the talent. And I realized that. So I think any type of press wins that you get, make sure to share that on social media and use that as a tool to be able to hopefully attract other people. You never know who's going to screenshot that and share it with other people as well. And I think once you're at the stage of a business where you are taking on funding, it's been a huge sort of way that I have vetted potential investors, is asking them how they can help us find talent, because I think that that is something that is such a huge time suck for internal employees. So trying to get people who do have a database of really strong talent and will help us find those senior leaders, because recruiters are, like Nicole said, very expensive, but the investors are giving you their money, right? So it's like, how can they save that money to go towards marketing or other parts of the business by helping you find those senior people? And so I think, honestly, I'm trying to take it back a step for people who are just starting their business and looking for employees. And I would just say, really focus in on the generalists who will do everything and anything. And then as you get closer to that stage where you're fundraising, really vet your potential investors and how they can help you with that.
Yeah, one other thing to add to that, when we were first starting, like pre-launch, I hired some of my best talents from cold outreach on LinkedIn. So, to Deepica's point of what a powerful tool LinkedIn is, scouring profiles of people who seem to have the background that's well suited for the role that you're hiring for, and just reach out. And that was like a key source. When we were in our pre-launch days, we didn't have cash for recruiters, and we were really scrappy, and cold outreach on LinkedIn is a fantastic a resource.
And I think just mentally accept that this is going to take a big chunk of your time, and that's just a part of the journey. Because I think for me, I found it to be so frustrating until I realized that is part of the duty of this role, and you have to do it, period.
Yeah. So, hiring is amazing, and being able to hire is great. But in order to do that, you actually need money. So another thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is your funding journeys. And I'd love to start with Nicole on this one. You've raised $4.2 million for Claire, which is one of the highest funding rounds for a Black female founder, which is absolutely terrible, but also amazing. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your funding journey. Why did you decide to pursue venture capital cash, and walk us through kind of the milestones of that?
Yeah, I'll first start by saying venture capital funding is not for every business. I think for me personally, my business is really capital intensive. It's not the kind of product you can make in your house. Paint is regulated. There's so many complexities to the fulfillment. So I knew that I needed outside capital, because I don't come from a background where I have a high net worth network of friends and family, which is another route a lot of people go. So I went straight to venture. And honestly, when I started my journey and started raising capital, I didn't know much about venture capital or how to go about raising funding. So I started with a really simplistic approach. It was like, who is investing in businesses that are similar to mine? And that's kind of where I started. I used a tool called Crunchbase to do a lot of research. I also used LinkedIn, especially when it came to identifying the right investors. I'd go to their profile and figure out if I knew anyone that was connected to them. It is a lot of putting yourself out there, because when you don't have a company to show, and because we raise pre-product, it's even harder. If you have a website or you have some traction or a little bit of press, it's easier to get investors to take your call or take the meeting. But when you have literally nothing but a deck, it's a lot harder. So I really had to put myself out there quite a bit. Tons of networking, went to 1 million panels just like this pre-COVID though, and talked to people and all of that. And I would say what helped me be successful in our early capital raises was, one, especially in the pre-launch kind of pre-seed raise, was having a very clear vision, a very clear financial model, and having some kind of proof points along the way. So at the time when we were pre-launch, I had already had kind of soft contracts with all of our key suppliers. The website was in the works. There was some level of I was already building. It wasn't like I need money to help me bring this idea to life. We were kind of already on our way. So I think that has helped. And then I'd say when you are a minority, because that's, I'm, I guess, double minority, don't listen to the data points, because if I listened to the data points, I probably would have been too discouraged to even try to raise capital. I think you have to remain steadfast in your vision. You have to be really confident in what you're building and the problem that you're solving, and be able to tell that story confidently to investors. And I think that storytelling aspect is also a really important part of raising capital, no matter what stage you're at, whether you're raising your pre-seed or your Series C. You have to be able to sell that vision and earn enough conviction from investors to support you. And I would say it's not easy. It hasn't been easy. I think the further you grow, unless you're just like an immediate rocket ship unicorn in 12 months, but the further you go, the more you have to prove, and the fundraising journey becomes harder and harder. It was incredibly difficult during the pandemic. I'm just in the process of kind of raising capital now, and it's really challenging. So, and it's demoralizing. So again, that's where that grit and that resilience really comes into play, because you'll need it to get through that fundraising process, because it can be a soul crushing experience to get as many no's as it generally takes to get to those few yeses.
Yeah, a few things there. I think the same way we said recruiting is a full-time job as a founder, so is fundraising. And it's like, I just closed my seed. I'm already doing talks for my Series A. And it's just like, I've accepted that this is part of it, but taking it a step back for somebody who potentially is not at the place where they can get the funding, because I totally get that too, because like Nicole said, there is more no's than there are yeses. And yes, it is a very mentally draining process and makes you doubt yourself a lot. So you have to constantly remind yourself your why, taking it back to that. But something that I did in the early days that I think is an interesting model. I'm not saying to not be protective of your equity, because I do think that that's very important, and you know your vision of where the brand's going to be in 10 years. So you do want to make sure you protect that. But I think it's a really interesting thing to be able to use equity as a way to get people who potentially don't need the capital right now, but are interested in the model that you're building. And maybe you could give them a percentage of, X amount of shares that vest over time, and they might be more interested in, if you don't have that initial capital. I did do that with a few different people, and I think I don't regret it at all, honestly, now that I understand how all of this works. If you don't have the capital, you don't have the capital, right? But you want to attract that talent, so you have to use what you can. So that's one thing. And then for my initial pre-seed round, I went to, instead of going the VC path, I focused in on angel checks from a ton of people in my network that were interested in putting small checks. And then those small checks added up to the amount that I needed for my pre-seed. Now, I know it's not easy to get people who have that capital, even in an angel situation. But I think to do that, always remember that you're constantly networking. And like Nicole mentioned, every single time you're going to these events or panels and networking opportunities, form those genuine relationships, because over time, those could end up being your future angel investors.
Yeah, I really like one thing that for us, as we were raising, was very true. And we started, our advisor told us, first do a list. And once you get to 50 no's, then you're closer to a yes. And I feel like starting with that mindset kind of like set us for success, because I was like, okay, one no, I'm getting closer to my yes. So every no took me closer to a yes. But another thing that for us, or I didn't know, is that there's a whole strategy and being ready for it. Like, I feel like so many people's like, oh, we need money. But once you sit down, it's like, okay, what is your strategy? Do you know what you're going to use it for? Did you do the due diligence yourself? Have you analyzed what this investor, and understanding that investors has timing. So, they have timings where they're deploying money. They have timings also where they are raising their own money, and they have their own investment thesis. So kind of like aligning all of that. So sometimes when you get a no, it's not because of you, it's because you're not aligning with their timing or their thesis or something else. But one thing that I came from Colombia. I was born and raised in a farm. So definitely I don't have like contacts here or anything like that, but just finding the right advisors. I feel like we reach out to key people in the industry that they were already at that stage, that were able to guide us and sit with us to build that deck, build that strategy, and help us kind of like have that language, because it is a language that you need to learn how to navigate and speak.
Thank you guys for sharing your experience. We're almost out of time. And in closing, I wanted to bring it back to another really great audience question. Someone's asked, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I mean, I guess I would say it's always it's a tricky question for me because I felt at 16 years old that I was going to do exactly what I'm doing right now. So I think the only advice I would give my younger self is cut out the noise and keep going because you were right. And I think for anyone out there that has this vision, like stick to it and don't feel as though all those no's you hear, don't let them distract you because you're right and you know what you're doing.
I think for me, where I was growing up, it was a really challenging space. Farmers produce about 15% below margin, and it just felt like there was no opportunities there. And I feel like I wish like back then I was owning and being proud of my roots, and I was owning my inheritance, which it was coffee, which so many times Hispanic or minority, we try to, like detach completely from what we come from and reinvent ourselves to be out there and be successful where we already come from such a rich place.
I think for me, it would be really simple, like you got this and just keep going, kind of like Deepica said, if you have a vision, just you know what you need to be doing and remain steadfast in that and just keep going, because often the difference between success and failure is not how smart you are, it's really how resilient you are and how much perseverance you have to keep going even when things are really, really hard.
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for sharing your insights and your amazing journeys with our panel today. It has been such a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.